true chaos isn't necessarily like the absence of order. It is the point within order that it cannot justify itself based on a prior form. Oh boy. Oh boy. Now that is what you call a delayed stream by 3 hours. That's because I was reading and writing. I think it's only fair I tell you guys what I was reading all day and what I was doing. I've been, what I was talking about yesterday on stream, where I'm trying to figure out what is going on with the U.S. ruling class right now and basically the dynamics of how anti-establishment shit works. I wanted to return to a book I had already read, which was Yanis Varoufakis's And the Weak Suffer, what is it called? The Weak Suffer What They Must. And it's a book he wrote about the origins of the European Union, which I wanted to go back to get a better idea. Just, it's kind of hard to explain why I'm going back to that book, but like it has a lot to do with what is the origin of the current U.S. establishment. Because I've always seen the EU as a proxy for the kind of coastal elite establishment being unrestricted by the Constitution in the U.S. Also, Dugin made a Telegram post that got me thinking. Dugin made this Telegram post where he was basically like, he was basically talking about something to do with Gramsci. And he actually, I don't know when the last time I read Gramsci is exactly. I'm going to put my fucking phone away. I don't know when the last time I read Gramsci is, but for some reason I've always had a very uncharitable memory of Gramsci. I've never liked him. I've always associated Gramsci was like the long march through institutions, so it's just like a bunch of cringe fucking professors and shit. Like, I am doing my revolutionary. Shut the fuck up. It's just cringy, right? But Dugin put it in a perspective I've never considered before, which I found pretty interesting, and it kind of took me down a rabbit hole to think about it. He was basically talking about how, with this so-called long march through the institutions, actually you should think of it in a different way. So Dugin was like, okay, the Bolshevik Revolution happened in Russia, which was a supposedly backward country. Now, Marxism claims the base determines the superstructure. Why did the revolution happen in the most least developed country? So the Gramsci, according to Dugin, basically says, and I don't know, for whatever reason, I don't remember this argument from reading Gramsci himself, but I guess the way Dugin is describing it puts it in a new, interesting light. Gramsci, apparently the idea is that with the creation of political power, the Bolsheviks were able to use the superstructure, more or less, in cutting to the chase, to refashion the base, right? Instead of relying on the causal determination of the base to produce a certain superstructure, they engaged in a political intervention, almost in a kind of voluntaristic way, which allowed them to actually create the prerequisites within the base for the outcome that they want. So, for example, electrification of the country, education of the country, all that kind of shit, developing the forces of production, etc., etc., etc. So Gramsci is basically saying that this speaks to, and this is Dugin's words, a relative autonomy of the political superstructure relative to the economic base. Now, I wrote a book on the October Revolution, so this is very simplistic phrasing to me, because I ditched the base superstructure causality, because to me the Bolshevik Revolution unleashed an entirely new understanding of time itself. So for me, it's not that like the breakthrough for me, but what I find interesting is this idea of the relative autonomy, which for Gramsci is kind of like voluntaristic. It's like there's this relative autonomy of the political sphere with regard to the economic base. And then Gramsci takes a logical step forward and he says, if there is a relative autonomy of the political with regard to the base, is there not also a relative autonomy of civil society and the institutions of civil society, culture, the media, in the intellectual sphere, whatever? isn't there also a relative autonomy of those things in the same way that there's a relative autonomy of the state? In other words, Gramsci is basically resolving this kind of issue of like, how is it that the first proletarian revolutionaries are bourgeois intellectuals and not workers themselves? And Gramsci's basically explaining it in those terms. So this idea of the relative autonomy kind of is interesting to me because I never put it in those terms. And I don't think I agree with Gramsci. What Gramsci does, and this is why I never liked Gramsci. Gramsci, according to Dugin, I have to go brush up, and I'm dusty on Gramsci. I have to go read him himself to do him justice. But it does confirm what I've like always held in my head about Gramsci. So this is why I'm taking Dugin's word so much. So Dugin basically says that the class struggle is boiled down not to an objective thing in history, but it's not based on any kind of objective necessity necessarily. It's based on an individual choice. So for Gramsci, waging the class struggle is down to the individual conscience of the intellectual of civil society. Because there's this relative autonomy of civil society with regard to the economic base, just like how there is with the political sphere, the individual conscience, which is based on the moral conscience, this is my interpretation, to become an organic intellectual of the working class and a fighter of the proletarian class, that's down to an individual's decision. It's a decision. It's a choice. To me, I vehemently disagree with this because my whole thing has been dealing with the same thing Gramsci was that there is a discontinuity. There is a discontinuity between the immanent economic base and the superstructure. That much is very clear, even down to the psychological level of the individual. But my whole project has been against morality and against choice as the foundation. For me, I am reintroducing necessity back into Marxism. I don't think there's room for necessity within Gramsci. This is why, for me, I speak in such materialistic terms. I don't care about this, hegemony that. For me, the important thing is obeying, using the intellect, whatever, just to clarify the laws of historical necessity and deepen them. There is a more or less inevitable historical teleology, whatever you want to call that. The role of the intellect and the role of thought, more generally, is just to clarify. Thank you so much, Clyde.
It's interesting you bring up Gramsci. I'm butting heads with Moldbug fans, and Moldbug is Gramsci but not blaming capitalism for the cathedral.
I think there's a big confusion about understanding this distinction between the base and the superstructure that has a lot to do with the prejudices entailed by this causal relationship with regard to time. So the idea of the base and superstructure, the idea of the base and superstructure is more or less implying to most people in the commonsensical term a relationship of time, that first you have a base which then causes the superstructure. But actually the way in which the base causes the superstructure is not in the form of linear temporal causality. It may very well be, actually, that the superstructure is the beginning in time. But that doesn't mean it's the cause. Just for something, this is one of the provocative insights about time that I have in relation to materialist dialectics. The beginning is not the same as the cause. The cause is something that reveals itself through the development of the effect. The cause does not actually precede the effect in time. The effect is first, yes, but through the development of the effect, the cause is revealed. And the same view is one I have in regards to the development of proletarian consciousness. The beginning probably is some guy like Marx or some individual consciousness that is arriving at some ideological conclusion, whatever. But it is through the development of this effect that the cause is revealed. So what does this mean? It means the cause was first, but not through its effect. The effect is the effect. Sorry, this is why it's so complicated, right? The cause is first, but in order for that to be revealed, it is only revealed through the development of the effect. It's not like there's an apparent cause that comes first, is what I'm trying to say. So this is why people who have this vulgar view of this vulgar type of materialism where they're like, well, I'm a truck driver, I'm a factory worker. Just shut the fuck up, bitch, because you're getting it all twisted. That class basis of our intellect and our consciousness is something that is revealed through the development of consciousness itself. It is not something that is already apparent beforehand in time. So for me, this is how I understand the October Revolution. Why is it that they began with the consciousness of the party? Is it because, like what Gramsci says, it's just a matter of a choice of moral conscience? I say no, that's not the case. There is a material necessity. It's just that that material necessity reveals itself through the development of the individual consciousness, and then the party consciousness and political consciousness, and so on and so on and so on. So this radically different understanding of the relationship between the so-called base and the superstructure is one of the defining features of the differences in my thought. But I'm just telling you, if you want to know why I'm late today, that's what I've been doing all day, is basically working on this. And then this also involved me reading back up and brushing back up on Varoufakis's description of the origins of the EU. Because I am very kind of baffled right now. By the way, we have a lot of news to cover. I mean, a lot, right? But I'm extremely baffled right now at this Elon Musk stuff because I don't know what to think. I am not sure if I buy into the idea that Elon Musk is just part of the plan of the establishment of deep state. Because this perhaps is a mistaken conception of how establishments work in the first place. What I'm trying to kind of parse out and figure out right now is like, we typically kind of have this idea that first you begin with an establishment, right? And then the people rise up and overthrow the establishment. But there's probably an intermediary factor within this dialectic, which is that there is some kind of element from the very top, at the very top of the ruling class, that unleashes and unlocks the ability for the people to be interpolated in a way beyond the establishment. So it's not just, for example, you have a fortress of the establishment, and then you have the nomadic barbarians at the gates. But there has to be someone at the top who opens the gates. I mean, Trump kind of acted in that way, even though he was fake, whatever. He kind of acted in that way. I'm wondering if Elon Musk is playing that role of opening the gates. And I think, don't misunderstand me, because I'm not saying Elon Musk is that guy. But I do think I heard Caleb say something similar in regards to Julius Caesar. I think Caleb did say something like, there may arise a...
Based.
Thank you, Justin.
Mr. Bellarmine Lettuce.
I don't know what that means. That there may arise some kind of figure within the bourgeoisie that basically gives rise, that represents like a Julius Caesar within the ruling class itself. I don't know if he said that, but I remember a clip of him I saw on Twitter where he was like, our job is going to be when that Julius Caesar reveals himself, we basically go and defend them or something, right? I don't know if, apologies if I'm taking his position out of context or misrepresenting it, but I think what I agree with about that is it's not just that from below something happens. Things happen within the contradictions of the ruling class, because there are contradictions within the ruling class itself. It doesn't particularly make sense to me that the law of social revolution entails, well, it's the people rising from below, and then the people. That's not what happens. It's never what's happened in the history of humanity, right? It's never ever what's happened. And then going back to Gramsci about this idea of the relative autonomy, Relative autonomy is probably a wrong way of putting it, because it's not that it has autonomy, it's just that it's not clear what the cause is. The cause is not apparent. So there's a difference between there being no cause and the cause not being clear. The cause not being apparent, or the cause not being developed. So there's a acute difference between those two things. And to me, I think that's what infrared is as well. Like, infrared is a media. I think Gramsci's interpretation was wrong, though, by the way. Why do I say Gramsci is wrong? Gramsci is an anti-Leninist to me. Why is he an anti-Leninist? Because for Gramsci, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe he didn't have this position, but everything from what I know from Gramsci is basically like this idea that the working class, organic intellectuals, need to work within the institutions of civil society that already exist and acquire hegemony within them. Are there any Gramsci readers in chat? Because it's been a long time since I've read him himself. Isn't that more or less what Gramsci is about? Or maybe I've got that mistaken and I've got that wrong. Can anyone confirm or tell me if that's more or less what Gramsci is about? Planting yourself within the institutions of civil society in order to acquire hegemony of the class struggle. That's more or less what Gramsci's about, right? That's what I associate with him, and that's how I remember him. Anyway, it's been a long time since I've read anything by Gramsci, though. And when I did read him, I was very dismissive of him, and I was not a fan. But if that is what Gramsci is about, he is wrong. He doesn't understand. He says, for Gramsci, he says, the experience of Lenin and the Bolsheviks was just political. It was just the relative autonomy of politics in regards to the economic base, but it did not address this question of the cultural hegemony. Gramsci's wrong. He doesn't remember that the Bolshevik Party began with an independent media outlet. It began with their newspaper. The Bolsheviks did not begin within the institutions of civil society. They created their own organ of civil society in the terms of the mass media of the newspaper, which was like this kind of new technology and this new niche. So my problem with Gramsci is he commits the era of social democracy and he doesn't learn the lesson of Bolshevism. Maybe there is relative autonomy and the task is to position oneself at precisely the undecided and indeterminate site of the superstructure that is not clearly consolidated by the base, that has some degree of relative autonomy. But it's for that precise reason that the organic intellectual should not plant themselves within the institutions that exist within civil society, but rather develop their own... Holy fuck, Janar. Holy
Heart,
fuck.
palms up together, gorilla, sun.
Holy fuck, thank you so much, Janar. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate you so much. But what I'm trying to say is that you don't do this to plant yourself within the existing institutions of society. You not only build your own counter-hegemonic institutions, you build your superstructural institution of civil society precisely at the avant-garde of the superstructure. Which means, if, for example, you are in Europe in the 40s or 50s, for example, where do you plant yourself? The existing institution of civil society, the university? No. You go to a more decentralized form of the cultivation of knowledge and culture. Maybe television, or maybe, I don't know, you develop your own TV station. I don't know, but get creative. But it's very clear that today, in the age of the internet, you do something like streaming. You see? Streaming is the cutting edge. Why? Because it's the most proximate relationship, and this is the decision we came to a long, long time ago as in Precede, because it's the most proximate relationship a disseminator of ideas can have to an audience. It is the most proximate relationship. It's the most immediate relationship, and it's the most proximate one. Here, in this stream, we are basically at the level of the highest degree of the relative autonomy of social phenomena with regard to economic base. Why? Because I can get up right now and start dancing and doing ridiculous, dumbass shit, I am free to do whatever the fuck I want, and yet there is still a social phenomena here. So this is the site of experimentation. This is the site of the highest degree of, let's call it, relative autonomy with regard to the economic base. For example, if I worked for a news station, I would be bound by the rules and conventions of the news station, which themselves obey a certain causal relationship to the economic base somewhere along the line, right? So here is where things are most chaotic, and that's why we do the streaming thing, right? That's why streaming is so important for infrared. It's the chaos. Chaos. We love chaos. We love chaos. I love everything that brings chaos, because chaos is where truth can arise. Only from chaos can order arise. Authentic order, not the fake kind. So that's why I love chaos. Just like Mao. Mao loved chaos. I love chaos. Mao loved chaos. Chaos. By the way, some people are very stupid, so I have to address the stupid people who are probably maybe naturally stupid. Perhaps they were inbred of some kind. They have greatly overestimated their own intelligence to one degree or another, and it has led them to a very sorry position of like basically being mentally extremely limited in their ability to understand anything. But chaos doesn't just mean people running around and buildings burning. For example, under Stalinism in the USSR, chaos most acutely concentrates itself where? In Stalin's cult of personality. It is at this point in Stalin's cult of personality where there is the most ambiguity and indeterminacy with regard to the possibility for the transformation of order. Because it's the Stalinist cult of personality that people were allowed to wield in order to challenge their local bureaucrats and the local party bosses and basically cultivate and develop an independent peasant culture from the people from the urban cities who came down and bossed people around, right? So, like the Stakhanovite movement, for example, that's true chaos, right? True chaos isn't necessarily like the absence of order. It is the point within order that it cannot justify itself based on a prior form. That's what real chaos means. Real chaos is the openness of history. Real chaos is the contingency of history. Real chaos is the point in the opening of a civilization, of a country, of a historical era in which it cannot fall back on any precedent form in order for its conclusion to be developed. That's what real chaos is. That's why I like chaos. But stupid people go, how's it say he's pro-chaos? How could you say that? That's anarchistic. Shut the fuck up. You're a dumb bitch. And you should never open your mouth in public. Right? I just anticipate people would say that. I don't know if anyone said that, but I'm just anticipating someone would say that, you know? I'm just anticipating someone would say that because, like, you are a dumb bitch if you like, that's the conclusion you draw. When Mao says there's chaos under heaven and the situation is excellent, what do you think he's talking about, Chaz? You think he's fucking talking about anarchy or something? No. Chaos is the engine of history. It's the engine of humanity. It's the engine of life itself. How could you not be pro-chaos? Of course I'm pro-chaos.